Ward 8 here in Salem, and the reason I'm here tonight is not only to echo what everyone else has been saying about the racism from that video, but also to talk about what Councillor Anderson touched on. Thank you for that. This has been a long history, not only of racism, but of xenophobia, Islamophobia, and disparaging various communities, such as my community, as a transgender and queer person. And to see that, and to see the way that he has painted myself as a trans person, as a predator, as inherently predatory, was not only revolting, but created a lot of fear in me. There, like many of the other people who have testified tonight have explained, there's a lot of fear now in this country. And Salem's not immune from that. I'm not immune from that fear walking down the street every day in downtown Salem or throughout my own community that I live in. And I ask that you continue to uphold these values that you've put forth, and saying that you will reject racism and all forms of bigotry to make this a safe community for all of us. So thank you for what you've done so far, and I hope that however the next counselor is selected, that those same values will continue to be represented through this council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here this evening. Leslie McMillan, followed by Laura T. Peffley, followed by Catherine Moore. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Peterson and councilors. I'm Leslie McMillan. I'm a resident of Ward 7. I represent myself. I'm actually a registered enrolled member of the Chinooka Indian Nation. Welcome to our territory, all of you. This has been a difficult year at the national level. The kinds of things that are said, really on more than one side, have been difficult for many of us to deal with. It's been very unpleasant. And if we only look at the national example, we'll be constantly at war with ourselves inside, saying what's going on, and we might have conflict with our friends, family, and neighbors. But here in Salem is where we live. Salem, the city of Shalom, Salem, the city of peace, wholeness, is where we live. These are the people that will help one another in tough times. We're all here together because we're concerned about an issue that arose within the last couple of weeks that we knew about. And there's been proper discipline and a right decision by the counselor to resign. But I'd like to say that let's not make this just into an opportunity to air more and more grievances and build empires and fiefdoms on the basis of grievances, because that's not healthy either. I understand completely and I sympathize totally with people's fears, the feeling of just discomfort, great discomfort, and wondering what might happen because of the tone set at the national level. But we have a different tone here in Salem. I honestly believe that, and I've seen it. And we have an individual responsibility, each one of us, to be the example that we want to have seen by our kids, our friends, our family, our neighbors. We are the ones that are going to set the example. And so let's try to find ways to come together in reconciliation and grace, and not only grievance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony. Laura T. Peffley, followed by Catherine Moore, and then Cameron Crusoe. I've said that wrong, I apologize.
Good evening. Laura T. Pelly. Unfortunately, unrepresented, Ward 6 resident, Madam Mayor, members of council, and ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your swift action as well in stepping up and stepping forward once this story broke, and finding your way through it and allowing all of us to come here today. It is unfortunate that we meet tonight to address this issue raised once again by the conduct of an elected official. It's a topic of conversation that now and has for decades and centuries actually reverberated across our country. Whether there are two sides of a coin or 12 sides of a story, its topic, in my opinion, is exceptionally important to all of us and of exceptional consequence. It is the basis by which we all play a part and must take a part in order to form that more perfect union, to establish justice, and to secure a true tranquility of living. It impacts everyone, whether they take part or subscribe to it. It lives in our constitutional ideals that we all love. It stands under the protection of our laws and our governance. It is the very foundation of our democratic republic process. The process cannot operate effectively in any other concern or decision-making with its public officials who conduct themselves independently, impartially, responsibly to the people they address. The public, whom these officials serve, must have confidence in the integrity of its government. Upon acceptance of the elected officials' public office, they are bound only by that code of conduct, an oath that they swear, a code of honor, if you will, to live to the highest standard, to discharge their duties faithfully and above reproach. The government indeed is limited in its power as recourse when someone steps outside those realms. Mayor, you yourself asked us to uphold to a certain decorum by tradition when you started this meeting and opened that. We have to stand on those, but it is only under the premise of democracy in action and censure, which achieved by the will of the people through public discourse and watchdogs that help to further and ensure that accountability in that process. That process was not disclosed by this council, even though that council member had been exhibiting those behaviors for a long period of time. Having those processes and protections help to ensure acts and policies of non-discrimination and better equality for every community. It is disappointing and discouraging that more individuals do not practice what they preach. They do not they do not think before they speak and act with this in mind. I firmly believe in the freedoms that we all share, expression of those freedoms. And I hope that it is imperative that we all understand for the future health and growth of our community that we all abide by those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Catherine Moore, followed by Cameron Cusall.
Hi, my name is Catherine Moore, and I reside in Ward 4. I was born and raised in Salem. I've raised 3 children. I have 1 adult child, 2 smaller children who are here with me tonight observing. And I've always been in Salem. We are the state capital here, and people come here from all over the state to participate at the legislature. We have to keep that in mind. Unfortunately, I've often had to apologize for the way things are run in Salem and the rampant racism, misogyny, ableism that it exists on our streets. I'd like to reiterate and reemphasize what others have said before me. The fact that a counselor in my community felt it appropriate to post as he did is unacceptable. It directly affected members of my family's safety. And that was not the counselor's first eager comment or post. His views have been loud and clear for quite some time, and folks have not been listening. Censoring and accepting this counselor's resignation is not enough, as was made obvious by Counselor Nanke's statement tonight. It wasn't simply Counselor Benjamin's pushing a button. That was it's a constant pattern. The fact that Counselor Nanke spent his time making excuses so it shows just how far this council has to come. Making excuses for this type of behavior is perpetrating. Shame on you, counselor. I encourage you to educate yourself. Our counselor is not representative of our community. You can look at it and see. I encourage folks who are outside of the business interests, specifically the Chamber of Commerce, to look at running for Ward 6. I'd also like to address the online cyberbullying that 2 officers in our community engaged in. This needs to be immediately addressed for folks to feel safe. The fact that so many local government officials find it appropriate to act in this manner shows how corruption runs rampant in our city government. And again, I'd like to say, please encourage yourself, Councilman Mankey. That was really unacceptable. Thank you.
I want to again reiterate, applause is not appropriate in this forum. If there's another burst of applause, we will recess. If you want to be at the podium and you want to speak, please let other people speak. Don't spoil the opportunity for others to be able to speak at the podium by disrupting this proceedings. I hope that's very clear. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Cameron Crucial. I'm a resident of Ward 1. And I wanted to talk more about the elephant in the room tonight, racism. I know a lot of members of the community have commented on this, pointed at it, but I want to be very clear that it's here, that we can all see it, and that no one denies that it exists. I heard a lot of words, many encouraging from our city councilors tonight. Words like disgusting, horrifying, reprehensible, unprofessional, unbecoming. But I only heard the word racism once, and that was to refute or call into question it as a motivating factor. And I think that's surprising to a lot of people here because a lot of people perceived it as the main motivating factor. But I think that speaks to the deepness of the divides in our nation and our community, that on an issue of racism, we can't even agree on a textbook definition of what constitutes racism or what doesn't constitute racism. And of course, we can go for days and weeks over every word said, not said, every action in an individual's lifespan to try and argue over whether it constituted racism or not, but I don't think that will heal those divides. I think we have to focus on what we do agree on, and hopefully what we can all learn from this. Because I think the ultimate lesson isn't specific to Councilor Benjamin or specific to his post, but more to the inevitability of racially charged incidents like this in an increasingly diverse community represented by a homogeneous body. What our founding fathers would call a tyranny of the majority. Because the ultimate violence in a democratic society isn't when someone else exercises their freedom of speech against you, but when your speech, when your representation is silenced. So moving forward, I want the question on every issue that comes before the City Council to be, who will speak for those who cannot? When we talk about the third bridge, who will speak for the Kalapuya, whose ancestral lands run directly underneath it and perhaps even burial grounds? When we talk about urban renewal, who will speak for the Latinas and people of color in the communities that face the threat of gentrification? In this upcoming election for the vacated ward, who will speak for these communities? Councilor Benjamin certainly couldn't and didn't. I can't, and unless I'm mistaken, I don't believe anyone on this council can. So I encourage everyone on the council and in the community to participate, to make your voice heard. And, you know, that words are great, words are beautiful, but what we need to show is a commitment to diversity, and that commitment requires action. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lee Coyne, followed by Colleen Goldberg, and then Rachel.
We're down to Lee Coyne level here.
Good evening, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and councilors and city attorney and all the other people here. This is a wake-up call. We are no longer the hibernation nation. Good soundbite for you guys. I think this is a wake-up call, and I want to be somewhat like a driver who looks only in the rear-view mirror of what has happened and doesn't look at the windshield in front of us is in trouble of a collision. I want to suggest some two positive ideas. we can to keep the momentum going to try to help us erase racism. The first has to do with the Peace Corps. This very auditorium over the last 5 years has played host to Peace Corps forums, of which I was a member of organizing with the library. And I think the Peace Corps represents a positive role model we could look to. The Peace Corps, in its training of volunteers, has special counter-terrorism type training. We did this in Arlington, Virginia, back after the Rodney King incident, one of the last major incidents in which racism became a public entity. It's a way that various exercises can be exerted, and we can learn how we often stick our noses up in the air, whether it's meat eaters against vegetarians, or gun owners against cat owners, or women against men, or various other categories where we need to play that one-upsmanship, we're ahead of you type game. I think this elitism is just one more facet in our racial and our sexism and our ageism type of behavior that we tend to condone sometimes by our silence. The other thing I'd like to suggest, possibly for February of 2018, is to find somebody in our community who's a playwright and write a story that one of the community theaters could do on the life of Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks is a positive role model. She never had a political office. She never had a clergy position, but through her efforts, she gave us a positive model of what an individual citizen could do, so we don't have to all sit in the back of the bus. So that is my message. We should no longer be a hibernation nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The downfall of democracy.
All right, Colleen Goldberg, followed by Rachel.
I'm not the director of anything. I'm just a small business owner and a homeschool mom.
Can we not start timing until we get the microphone all steady? And then we need you to face over here so we can hear you here.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm a homeschool mom, also a small business owner, and I can tell you that this year has given us a lot to talk about in history and in government. And just with this particular situation, we've been able to address with our 13-year-old son that with actions there come consequences. And those consequences can not only affect you, but then affect your family, as Councilman Benjamin is finding out, and that's unfortunate. But I think also with those consequences, there's the reactions that we've seen. So just reading the posts of what people have said back to him and what they've said to one another is almost as disturbing as what caused it. And so I think that's just something that, that's kind of given us a little bit of a teachable moment in our house. But what is our reaction when I say to you, I want you to coexist with me, or when I say to you, I want you to be tolerant of me? Am I saying that only when you agree with me, or am I actually putting that into practice? And so I think it's just a good reminder of what are our reactions to these types of things. And I think what you have done as a council is appropriate. But I just tell my son all the time, remember, would you say this to somebody to their face? And it's easy to sit behind a computer and call for someone's head, but remember when you asked for his head on the platter, you didn't just get his, you got his wife and his 2 children. So I think it's just being mindful of not only what has happened and the consequences, but how you react to that. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Rachel, followed by Karen Messer, and then Ronnie. Okay. And then after that, we're going to take a break so that the council can stretch our legs and move around a little bit, but stay in your seats. We're not on a break yet.
Almost there, though. Mayor, council members, my name is Rachel Nolan. I apologize for not putting my last name on there. I'm a resident of Ward 2. I moved to Salem in 2007. I'm a native Oregonian, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to read something to you right after I thank you for your action earlier and for the many wise words we've heard before us. This is from the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, DPSSD. It is the Criminal Justice Code of Ethics. It's an oath that every certified police officer takes. And this is just an excerpt. As a criminal justice officer, my fundamental duty is to serve humankind, to safeguard lives, and to protect all persons against deception, the weak against oppression or intimidation, and the peaceful against violence or disorder, and to respect the constitutional rights of all people to liberty, equality, and justice. I will keep my private life unsullied as an example to all, maintain courteous calm in the face of danger, scorn, or ridicule, develop self-restraint. It goes on. I'm not here to encourage a witch hunt or to demonize a police officer, but I am here to ask you to have an independent investigation. I'm very concerned about the reports in the media about the police chief saying this doesn't discredit the police department. As a citizen, I'm afraid it does. Councilor Anderson, you said earlier about Councilor Benjamin that this wasn't an isolated incident. If the reports are true, that there were 21 separate comments on this woman's page, unprovoked, does that sound like an isolated incident? Does it sound like a first-time offense? Does it sound like someone who, if they get off, they're going to suddenly start respecting other people? I'm not here to be anti-police. I worked closely with them in the past. I'm actually here because I do respect them, and I want you to hold them to a higher standard. As public servants, we're all held to a higher standard, and I think that's rightfully so. It isn't just a question of First Amendment protections as a citizen when you're a public servant. It's a question of the public trust. And so in closing, I would just ask you to please be courageous and look at that separate, independent investigation. Thank you.